Okay, so today we're going to talk about finding equations of lines. Before we do that, I think we should do a little bit of review about lines. What do you remember about lines? Anything?
They go forever.
They go forever, that's true. What else do you remember about lines? That doesn't make lines unique. Other things go forever too.
That's true.
What else do you know about lines? Yes?
They have a slope.
They have a slope. Excellent. And you might remember there's a little formula for slope. Anybody remember the formula for slope of a line?
Y equals mx plus b.
That's a different equation. Okay, that's called slope-intercept form of a line. That's an important one. Y equals mx plus b. But that wasn't quite the formula I was looking for. Anybody remember the formula for slope? Yes?
Y2 minus y1 minus 2
All right, so we have m, which is the slope. It's usually called rise over run. And the little formula that we use is we subtract the two y numbers and we divide by, subtract the two x numbers. x2 minus x1. And it's important that you keep it in that form. You have to have the y's on top and the x's on bottom. Probably the biggest mistake I see people make with slope is they put the x's on top and the y's on bottom. Has to be y's on top. All right, and then somebody already mentioned we have this thing called y equals mx plus b, and I called that the slope-intercept form of a line. Why would you call that slope-intercept form? Well, what's this letter m? Slope, just like it was up here. So this equation tells you the slope. And what's this thing b? Which intercept? This is the y-intercept. So this is called slope-intercept form because this letter m tells you the slope. And this letter b, 0 comma b, is the y-intercept. Okay, so for example, I might give you the equation y equals minus 2x plus 4. Right away, immediately, you should recognize that that equation is a line. How do you look at an equation and right away, immediately know that it's a line? Speak up, I couldn't hear you.
Because it'll have an intercept.
Okay, well, it's in the form y equals mx plus b. So it's in slope-intercept form, so right away you should know that's a line. What if I had written the equation this way? That's the same equation. All I did is I added 2x to both sides. Even if I wrote the equation that way and it's not in slope-intercept form, you should still immediately know that's a line. How do you immediately know it's a line? It's still going to have a slope and an intercept. I guess what I'm looking for is, what if I wrote this equation? Y equals minus 2x squared plus 4. That's almost exactly the same equation, but you should look at that one and you should say that one is not a line. How do you know that one is not a line? Because it has x squared. So how do you look at an equation and know that it has a line, know that it is a line? Well, really, you're looking at the variables, and you're looking at the variables and making sure they don't have any exponents. No x squareds, no y squares, no cubes. Also no roots, no square roots, no cube roots on either of them. And also, you don't have any division. You don't have 2 divided by x. That would not be a line. So that's how you tell something is a line. Really, you look at the variables, and you notice that you have just an x, you have just a y. There's no division, there's no square roots, there's no cube roots, there's no squares, no cubes, any of those things. Anybody know what that one happens to be? Y equals minus 2x squared plus 4? It is an equation, that's correct. It's an equation because it has an equal sign. What kind of shape do you get if you graph it? Anybody know? That one happens to be a parabola. That's correct. Whatever that is. We'll talk about parabolas later in this course. Important thing is this one is not linear. Okay, so one of the first things I might ask you to do if I give you y equals minus 2x plus 4 is I might ask you to graph it. So how would you graph that line? All right, we know that our y-intercept is the point 0, 4. This right here tells us our y-intercept. So we start there, we put a point, we put a dot at 0, 4. Excellent. And then what do we do?
Go down 2 and then over 1.
I go down 2 and over 1. And how do I know to go down 2 and over 1? Because that's my slope. My slope here is negative 2. And I like to think of it as negative 2 over 1, which tells me from here, the negative 2 tells me go down 2, and the 1 tells me go to the right 1. So I go down 2 over 1. That gives me a couple points. Of course, they don't quite line up because my grid isn't well drawn, but it's not too bad. And so there's the graph of the line. Now, this point that we happened to find right here, this one also happens to be a very important point. This one, this 0, 4, this was our y-intercept. What's this point right here called? It's 2, 0. And what's the name for it? That's the x-intercept. And in this class, we will see later on that x and y intercepts are usually very important things. We'll talk about x and y intercepts a lot in this class. Questions on that? All right, well, here's more of what we're going to be doing in this section. In this section, I'm going to give you information. Maybe I'll give you a graph like so, and I want you to give me the equation of the line. So I'm going to give you 2 points on this line. This is the point, negative 4, 0, and this is the point, maybe that looks like it's about 0, 3. So there's the line. What I want is I want the equation of that line. How are we going to find the equation of that line? We're going to look at the points, and what are the points going to help us find? The slope. When you're dealing with a line, the single most important thing about a line is the slope. So no matter what information I give you, if you want to find the equation of a line, you need to know the slope. How are we going to find the slope? We'll use our little slope formula. Slope is y2 minus y1 over
x1, or x2.
x2 minus x1. That's correct. All right, so I have 2 points. I have the point negative 4, 0 and 0, 3. Which number is y sub 2? It could be 0 or it could be 3. Does it really matter which one you call y sub 2? It has to be one of the 2 y numbers, but which one you call it really doesn't matter. Personally, if I were doing it, I would probably call this one y sub 2, which means this 0 right here is x sub 2. And once I decide that, then that means this 0 is y sub 1, and that one is x sub 1. So y2 minus y1, that's going to be 3 minus 0, divided by, what's x2 minus x1? 0 minus negative 4. Very good. You have to keep it in the same order. Since I used 3 in the y2 position, I have to use 0 in the x2 position. So that's 3 over 4. Now here's a little bit of a check on slope, something you should be looking for. When I looked at this line, I immediately knew that my slope should be a positive number. How did I know without doing any work at all that my slope should turn out to be a positive number? Because the line's going upward as you go from left to right. When the line's going this way, your slope's always going to be a positive number. Conversely, when your line is going this way, when it's going downhill, your slope's going to be a negative number. That was negative there. Okay, so now I know the slope. But that wasn't the question. The question was, tell me the equation of the line. Now that I know the slope, how do I find the equation of the line? All right, so we have our nice equation, y equals mx plus b. I know the slope, we figured that out, that's 3/4. Do I know the b number? Yes, how do you know the b number? It's right there, it's the y-intercept on the graph. So our answer is y equals 3/4 x plus 3. Questions on that one? Go ahead.
So in every equation, if you look at the y, since there's two different y, it doesn't matter which you pick for this.
No, it doesn't matter which one you pick. For example, if I'd have done this, if I'd have reversed them, if I'd have said this is my y2 number, and I had gone 0 minus 3, then what would I have to do for my x's? If I use this one as y2, then this one would have to be x2. So I'd have to go minus 4 minus 0. So that gives me negative 3 divided by negative 4. But what happens when you divide two negative numbers? It's positive. So the order that you do it in doesn't matter. The important thing is you make sure you put the y's on top. And then once you decide which number is y2, you need to make sure to use the same coordinate as x2. Otherwise, you'll get your signs backward. All right, let's try a slightly harder one now. What if I gave you, I'm not going to draw the graph this time. We don't really need the graph. Oh, somebody make up some nice points for me. Give me two numbers. 5 and 9 is our first point. And how about our second point? 2 and 3. Okay, so same directions. I want to find the equation of the line that goes through those 2 points. In order to find the equation of the line, the first thing I need to find is slope. Slope is always the most important thing. So we find our slope. M equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. What's y2 in this case?
3.
I guess I would use 3 because that was the second point. That was the second y number. So I guess for my y's, I'm going to go 3 minus 9. Which means for my x's, I'm going to go 2 minus 5. That's negative 6 over negative 3. That happens to be a nice number too. That was lucky. Usually when you just pick numbers at random like that, your slope doesn't come out to be a nice whole number. Usually you end up with a fraction. So we picked random numbers and we got lucky. That's a good thing. Now, from here there are 2 ways to proceed. What I notice with the 2 points that I have is that I don't have the y-intercept. How do I know I don't have the y-intercept? Because I don't have x to be 0. To be the y-intercept means your x value has to be 0. So if I want to use y equals mx plus b, that's okay, but I'm going to have to do some work this time to find the b number. I don't know it right away. So I'm going to do it this way, and then I'm going to do it another way too. So we would have y equals 2x plus b. We know our slope is 2. How do I find the b number? Anybody know? Go ahead.
You can plug in, set up the values that you have from earlier.
Exactly. To find the b value, I'm going to pick one of the 2 points. It really doesn't matter which one. And I'm going to plug in the x number and the y number, and then I'll get the b all by itself. And this way works pretty good when this slope is not a fraction. When this slope is a fraction, this method can be a pain in the neck. That's why I'm going to show you another way to do it here. Okay, so I'm going to use this point, I guess, and I'll plug it in. So my y number is 9, and my x number is 5. So I'm going to have 2 times 5 plus b. So 9 equals 10 plus b. I subtract the 10 on both sides. B is -1. So my final answer is y equals 2x minus 1. So there's one way to answer that problem. The second way to answer the problem is to use a slightly different equation of a line. And the slightly different equation is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And this one has a name too. We like to give things names. Anybody know the name of this equation? This one is called point slope form. Well, the slope is obvious. Why does it have the word slope in it? That's m. Slope is there. Point. x1, y1 is one of the points. So this one uses one of the points and the slope. And again, this is the way I prefer to do it this way when the slope is a fraction. Because all I have to do, I go y minus, and I pick one of my y numbers. Which y number do you like? 2? 2's not a y number. 3? 3 is a y number. Y minus 3 equals, my slope was 2, times x minus, since we use 3 for our y number, we have to use 2 for our x number. And there's the equation of the line. Now, the answer doesn't come out as clean looking as this, but again, when this slope here is a fraction, we can leave our answer just like this, and we don't have to do any work with the fractions. Makes it quite a bit easier. Now, if you want to, you can check. You could distribute this 2 through, and then you could add the 3 over, and you could convince yourself that you really do get exactly the same answer. And you do. Questions on that? Okay, for part C here, first thing I would do is I would find the slope. So m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I'm going to go 9 minus 4 over -1 minus 3. That's 5 divided by -4. I'm going to write that as -5/4. Now I have to make a decision. Do I want to use y equals mx plus b? Or do I want to use y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1? That one. Because, and my answer is, I look at these 2 points. Do either of these 2 points give me the b number? No, they don't. Because to get the b number, I would need 0 comma something. I don't have 0 comma something. And then I notice that my slope is a fraction. Yes?
If you have put both the points, the x's on the
What if both x's are 0?
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. We'll answer that one in a minute. You get something special there if both your x's are 0. All right. So, finishing this one. I would notice that my slope is a fraction, and I don't know the y-intercept. So personally, I would use y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. That's not to say y equals mx plus b won't work. I just think it's harder. That's my opinion. Okay, so answer is y minus, I pick one of the y numbers, I'm going to use 4, equals m was negative 5/4 times x minus 3. Since I picked 4 for my y number, I have to use 3 for my x number. And there's my answer. I don't see any directions that tell me I have to simplify it. So being lazy, I don't. I leave it just like that.
You simplify the slope or not?
I would simplify the slope. If the slope came out to be like negative 6/4, then I would have reduced my fraction, yeah. If you didn't reduce the fraction, I wouldn't mark it wrong. I would probably just indicate that you should reduce your fractions, but that doesn't make it wrong.
But you can just leave it like that?
Sure, why not?
Because it's not done.
Why is it not done?
You just don't have done it. It's not in my
I agree, it is not in y equals mx plus b form. Did the directions tell me write my equation in y equals mx plus b form?
No, not specifically, but it says determine the equation of the line.
That's true, and there it is. There's the equation of the line. It's not in the form you like. It might not look pretty, but it's the correct answer. Okay? And that bothers people because a lot of times when you were in high school, you were always told you always have to write it in y equals mx plus b form. I don't personally think that's always the best way to write it. Because if you put this one in y equals mx plus b form, it's going to have lots of fractions,
Yeah, it's pretty much trying to do that.
and it's going to be hard to graph it. Where I think it would be easier to graph it leaving it in this point. Leaving it in this form, I know one of the points is 3, 4, and then I use my slope. I go down 5 and over 4. So that's what I would do. The second one, and then we'll come back to what if both of your x's are 0. Come back to that one in a second here. Again, I have 2 points, 6, 0, 0, 4. First thing I better do is find the slope. So m equals, let's see, I'm just going to go 4 minus 0 over 0 minus 6. So that's 4 over negative 6. And I would prefer that you reduce your fractions and write that as negative 2/3. But again, if you don't reduce your fractions, I'm not going to mark it wrong. If you leave it as negative 4/6, that's okay. This time, do I happen to know the y-intercept?
Yes.
I do. How do you know the y-intercept? Because it's right there, 0, 4. If you have 0, something, that's always your y-intercept. So this time I know my b number is 4. So for this problem, I would use y equals mx plus b, even though my slope is a fraction, because I can write y equals minus 2/3 x plus 4. My b number I know. I don't have to do any work to figure it out, so y equals mx plus b is a better choice. Questions on that? All right, now to answer his very good question. What if the x number was 0 twice? What if I gave you the 2 points 0, 6 and 0, 4? What would you do?
Well, that's just
It happens to be a vertical line. It helps if you draw it.
the axis.
It happens to be the axis. You have the point 0, 4, and you have the point 0, 6. If you connect those two dots, what do you get? You get the y-axis. You get just a vertical line, don't you? So that's a special kind of line. So your line would look like that. Anybody happen to know the equation for that special line? All right, well, I'll give you a hint. This is the point 0, 4. This is 0, 6. Down here, I would have 0, negative 1. I would have 0, negative 10. What do all those points have in common? X is always the number 0. So what's the equation of that line? X is the number 0. That's the equation of that line. So vertical lines are a very special case. Vertical lines always have the form x equals a number. we're not going to deal with vertical lines much in this class. But there's the answer. All right, let's take a look at number 2 here. Number 2 says, the number of city and county ordinances that restrict outdoor smoking has increased approximately linearly from 30 ordinances in 1999 to 1,532 in 2012. Let n be the number of ordinances at t years since 1990. Determine an equation of the linear model to describe this data. All right, so there's lots of words there. What are they asking you to find? What does it mean when it says determine an equation of the linear model? It wants us to do exactly what we've been doing. It wants us to find the equation of a line. Okay? And what it's really done, it's just given us 2 points. It told us we have 30 ordinances in 1999, that's 1 point, and we have 1532 ordinances in the year 2012. Which letter is X and which letter is Y? Is ordinances X or is ordinances Y? Time, is that X or Y?
That would be why it's not depending upon the ordinances. The ordinances
Ordinances
are dependent on time.
are dependent on the time, that's correct. So that tells me that time should be the X number. X is the independent one. If you have a word problem and your word problem has time in it, time is almost always X. 99.99% of the time is going to be X. All right, so here's the deal. They told us we're going to deal with T years since 1990. So if I'm starting in 1990, when is the year 1999? 9 years later. So one of the points they're giving us is the point 9, 30. In year 9, there were 30 ordinances. And then the other point would be the year's 2012. If I start in 1990, how far away is the year 2012? 22 years? So 22, 1532. Okay, so there's the first deal with the word problem. You've got to understand that, first you've got to understand what they're asking. They're asking us to find a linear equation. And secondly, you need to understand that they've basically given you 2 points, just like I did in all the problems up above. Once you have 2 points, how do you find the slope of the line? You use your little slope formula. So m is 1532 minus 30 over 22 minus 9. 1532 minus 30 is 1502. And 22 minus 9 happens to be 13. 1502 divided by 13. Good time for a calculator. I'm going to round off here. I'm going to call it 115.5. It didn't tell me how much to round off. I'm going to go to 1 decimal place. That seems kind of reasonable. Okay, so now I have my slope. How do I find the equation now? Okay, so again I have to make a choice. Do I want to use y equals mx plus b or y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1? I don't think I would use y equals mx plus b because I do not know the intercept. That's my choice. So let's see, didn't really leave enough room here. So I'm going to go down here and write it. So I would use y minus 30 equals 115.5 times x minus 9. So I used y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Now, technically I made a mistake there. It's not a huge mistake, but it's a small mistake. I really should not have used the letters X and Y. Because it told me in the directions I really should use N and T. Okay, and on Wednesday we'll talk about doing your homework online. When you do your homework online, if you use X and Y when it tells you to use N and T, the computer's not going to know it. It's going to mark it wrong, even though you did all the work right. So I probably really should write N minus 30 equals 115.5 times T minus 9. The computer will be extremely fussy about that. All right. What is the slope? 115.5. What does it mean in this situation? Excellent. Notice that when we did our slope, we had ordinances on top and we had years on bottom. So what this number tells me is the number of ordinances goes up by 115.5 every year. Ordinances increase by 115.5 every year. That's what that tells me. All right, then my last question for the day, and I'm out of time. What's the n-intercept? Okay, how do I find n-intercept? Well, in this case, n is the same as the letter y, so it's really asking for the y-intercept. So how do you find y-intercept? You plug 0 in for x. So if I ask you for the n-intercept, that means you plug 0 in for the other letter, no matter what the other letter is. So I plug 0 in for t. That means I'm going to have n minus 30 equals 115.5 times negative 9. So n equals, using my calculator, I get negative 1009.5. So my n-intercept would be 0, comma, that, negative 1009.5. And then again, what does it mean? Well, this means in year 0, when is year 0? Would be 1990, because that's when we started. We started 1990. In year 0, the number of ordinances is negative. Can you have negative ordinances? No. So what does it mean? It really doesn't make sense in this problem. It's impossible. Doesn't make sense. Impossible. Can't have negative number of ordinances.